Hello YouTubers, Joe Kersey here at 10 till noon on Tuesday, June 25th. Now I'm going to start off briefly with a bit of an apology. I had watched a video by a fellow, Kjeldahl 911, yesterday, in which he had said that he did not wish to become a townie. Now, he carefully defined what a townie was in his usage, which was a fellow who, a local fellow who goes to a bar and, a local bar and becomes well known, and essentially the bar becomes his sort of second life, and that was his definition of a townie, which puzzled me a bit. Now, in earlier videos of this individual, he has talked about how he's been in a frat and is in a frat and likes being in a frat, and it's been very wonderful for him. That's fine. I mean, that's not an experience I had, but that's fine. As it turns out, my dad was in a frat, my uncle was in a frat. So then I got thinking about sort of the whole thing about town versus gown and town, dorm, frat, townie usage, how it's evolved or changed. Now, see, I went to Ohio State in 1969 to 1972. And, undergraduate, and then I went to medical school, after that at Ohio State. And I stayed in the dorm the first 3 years, and after that I had a series, not a series of apartments, I had a couple of apartments, and then, some more extended living arrangements, let's put it that way. And obviously the word townie came from the whole town versus gown thing that originated in the medieval university era, when the students who had to wear a distinctive dress were generally, not generally, but quite often in conflict with the the folks that lived in the same town, hence town versus gown, townies. At Ohio State, the word townie wasn't very much in use. Now, the only time I really heard it when I was in school in, early 70s was in the context of Miami University. Now, I had a very good friend that went down to Miami University, and I'd go down and see him from time to time, and very occasionally he'd come up to Ohio State, and he lived in his dorm for 1 year. They make everybody live in the dorm freshman year. They did then. I don't know what they do now. But he kept talking about how the frat people, the fraternity people hated not hated. There was this sort of ritual conflict between the people that lived in the dorms and the people that lived in frats and fraternities, and then the term townie was reserved for the people who were strictly speaking local to Oxford, Ohio. I can't say that was the Ohio State usage. As near as I can figure out, we had the thing with dorms. You were in a dorm, or you were in a frat, or you lived at home if you were from Columbus. And the townies, basically, the phrase townie word was reserved for people who just was reserved for folks who were from the Columbus area and lived, at home, generally with their parents, or sometimes they might have an apartment, maybe not on campus, but somewhere else. And I don't recall quite the degree of, but I don't get the sense that that's how this Mr. Kjeldahl 911 was using the term, and certainly that's not how he defined it in his video. So it's interesting how by his definition, that pretty much included all the people who lived in fraternity houses off campus, because they were living in Columbus. Um, so it's interesting to see how the usage of words change over time. I clearly, in my remark or comment on his video to him, I was conflating categories and times, and that was very imprecise thinking on my part, and I certainly apologize for that. I think my tone may have been a bit off. Well, having gotten over that, so then I got thinking further, because as I said, my dad was in a fraternity. In fact, that's, he and he and my mother met at a fraternity dance. Now he was in I want to say Phi Gamma Delta, but don't hold me to that. It's the one commonly called the Gobblers. And he was in that at Wilmington College between 1928 and 1930. After that, he did the last 2 years, 1930, 1932 at Ohio State, where he finished up his Bachelor of Science in Agriculture. And but apparently, my mother, who was not in a sorority, now again, don't hold me. I don't think she was. She was living with her sister, who was married and lived in Wilmington at the time. She met him at one of his fraternity's dances. And he gave her his celluloid fraternity pin. It wasn't one of these. It was like a campaign button today. She kept that thing pinned in her jewelry box. So I got thinking about sort of that era, and here's a man like my dad who probably was one of the least. Well, see, now here I am stereotyping. I shouldn't say that. He was in fraternity. My uncle, his brother, his oldest brother, his older and oldest brother, who died at the age of 44. Yes, 44. Was in a medical fraternity. Well, he was in a medical fraternity the few months he could stay in any given medical school from time to time. He was in Chi Phi. I've got his old anatomy textbook, and in the front, few pages, he's doodled all the Chi Phi stuff. So anyway, I got thinking about college experiences and how they've changed over time, and quite obviously from listening to Mr. Scholl's videos about how he finished up, I think, at Quinnipiac, I think. Things have changed. I mean, obviously things change. So my dad had always talked about excellent science instruction he had gotten at Wilmington College, and he did. Now, I got when my mother was in the restroom, sort of getting ready to cack off. I was taking care of her mail, and she would get alumni stuff from Wilmington College. See, she went 2 years to Wilmington College, and then taught school. And then when in the course of human events, the state of Ohio decided that everybody who taught school had to have a bachelor's degree, she went to Miami University, and there were no fraternity, sorority, dormy, towny issues at that point when she was going to Miami University. She went 4 summers between 1957 and 1961, and finished up her bachelor's degree. And so she was considered a Miami University. Well, she was. I got both alumni stuff. Anyway, but she did get Wilmington College alumni stuff, despite just only having gone 2 years. Excuse me. And so I have this here. Let's see. Now, see this fellow there with the retort and chemistry equipment? That's Carlos Crum. That's Dr. Crum, well, Professor Crum, let's put it that way. And he taught chemistry and quantitative analysis and so forth at Wilmington College. And as it turns out, my dad had that course, and I have here his quantitative analysis notebook. That's Joe S. Kersey. That's his name, my name, Wilmington College, and it's he got a 90. But one of my favorite things, and he talked so often to me about the determination of nitrogen by the Kjeldahl method, which I don't know if they still use that anymore or not. But here's his lab. Here's his lab, from his quantitative analysis experiment. Okay, of course he describes the procedure and so forth, and it's in a bound book with numbered pages, like a standard scientific laboratory notebook. And then at the bottom, back here, then the end page is his his calculations, and they were using commercial fertilizer samples. There's a number of these commercial fertilizer samples that they had done. See, and he was in an ag program, and so that's like the perfect way to, you can run your own quality assurance on your own fertilizer, isn't it? So that was fun to sort of revisit. And then another one of these pictures and one of these alumni things was this. Here are these guys dissecting a bunch of frogs in a biology class run by a fellow named Frank Hazard, Dr. Frank Hazard. Now, my dad talked to me about Dr. Pyle, who was the physics guy, although I don't have any of his lab reports on that. And of course, he talked about Dr. Crum, the quantitative analysis experience. But he a lot of times talked to me about this guy, Dr. Frank Hazard, who taught biology and zoology and botany. And well, botany, that was when it was botany and zoology without being combined into biology. And my dad had great love of botany, and he always regretted that I never took any botany. I guess over time I've come to regret I never took any botany either, come to think of it. But he he told this story. Dr. Hazard was emphasizing the importance of precise observation. Very much like I guess try to emphasize, precise thought and precise expression and so forth. So precise observation. So he went over. They had all these stuffed specimens all over the around the thing. A number of you probably all have been in zoology and biology classrooms, and you've got all these things around, or in a good school system you do. And there was well, it wasn't a bad. It was a wolverine, interestingly, for those of people who are into the whole Ohio State, Michigan nonsense. And he says, "Now I want you to watch me while I go up and deal with this specimen, and then I'm going to come back down the ladder, and then I want each of you to go up there and do exactly what I had done, what I did." And so he went up the ladder, and he sort of had his back to them, but not completely, and he picked the thing up and handled it and so forth. And then he sort of turned his back, how did this work? He turned his back to them, and he before he had turned his back to them, he stuck his finger in the specimen's anus. And then as he was sort of going around, he sort of, the way they saw it was probably something along the line of like, what he had done was he'd stuck his finger in front of his face, but he hadn't put it in front of his mouth. He hadn't put it in his mouth. But every single one of these guys, it was all male class. Every single one of these guys climbed up that ladder and stuck their finger up the Wolverine's behind, and then came down and stuck it in their mouth. And that's a lesson on always being very careful what you see and observe and say. So, I think on that one I'm going to let it slide, YouTubers. All righty now. Bye-bye.